So it's been a very strange year so far, to say the least. It's like we're kind of in the middle of this weird Twilight Zone episode that never seems to end. And although things keep getting delayed, postponed, we have still gotten a lot of albums released throughout the year. Of course, most of the artists and bands can't properly market it and perform it or anything, but a lot of people have released music throughout the year, and there is a lot of albums that I just forgot to review, didn't get round to, or missed when it initially came out and checked out later on. I've still got a list of almost 30 albums to catch up on from the year that I've not even listened to yet, but I thought maybe it would be a good idea to do a little video talking about all the albums that I've missed, like I've done multiple times in the past. I keep planning on doing this video and never get round to it, and I wrote a huge script and I decided, you know what, this is never going to get made if I just keep writing and adding to it, so I'm just going to blast through it, talk about as many albums as I can. Basically every album and or EP that I've listened to this year and not reviewed is going to be here, so hopefully it'll give you an idea of what I've been listening to and give you some stuff to check out. So I quite liked the Big Moon's debut. Similar to a lot of the indie bands around in the scene at that time, it was very gritty and raw, but it was definitely a really cool feminist sort of edge to it, which was clearly inspired by Riot Girl sort of bands like Bikini Kill. It was never incredibly prominent, it was more of a like an underlying quality, but I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of really catchy, well written songs on it, so I was very excited to hear their follow-up album, especially after seeing them support the Pixies last year. And this album is definitely a very big change in sound and tone. While the previous album was just basically pure indie rock full of vigor and aggression and stuff, this is much more of a indie pop sort of album, kind of going in the direction that a lot of indie bands are going through at the moment, clearly inspired by the huge success from the 1975. And I think overall the album is one that can be kind of hit or miss. There are some really great songs on there, like Take a Piece, which I really love, but a lot of the album does kind of sound a little bit generic in terms of this indie pop sort of style. There's not really a lot that sets this album apart from others, and I thought that their first album definitely had a lot of those interesting qualities that made it unique and made it different compared to most other indie bands. I wouldn't say this is like them selling out or anything, but it definitely feels like them trying to adapt with the direction the genre's going in, and it kind of feels like they're not utilising all the strengths that I think they have. It's by far not the worst indie album I've heard this year. It's still pretty damn good and I enjoyed it, but yeah, it's not an album that I've been returning to much since its release, so I'm going to give Walking Like We Do by the Big Moon 3 out of 5. Circa Waves are another very similar indie band who constantly change and adapt to what's going on in the scene. Their music is not the most original in the world, like none of their music is very original. It all very much is basically like what everyone else that is big in the indie scene are doing, but I do think they've got a lot of really catchy, well written and fun indie pop songs that I like a lot, especially on their first couple albums. This double album, Sad Happy, is one that I just found really generic. I didn't necessarily hate anything, but I didn't really like anything either. It just kind of started and finished and nothing really made an impact on me. The songs weren't very catchy. The production was decent. The songwriting was, I'd say, slightly above subpar, but there was nothing really here that really jumped out at me. Even like, I'd say pretty much all their albums before had at least one or two like songs that really like hooked its claws into me and made me want to listen to them more. And yeah, at least all their albums have at least one or two songs that I really like or loved. This album didn't really have anything. The slower songs were very boring and forgettable, and their usual pop catchy single fare was not really that great either. Very much felt like they were kind of running out of steam, which is a shame because I was hoping to enjoy this album. But yeah, I'm gonna give Sad Happy 2 out of 5. I had never listened to Poppy properly. I'd heard like songs here and there, including the song Scary Mask that they did with Fever 333. But yeah, I was never really a huge fan of what I'd heard of like her more pop oriented stuff. But seeing her go into this new metal direction was something that really intrigued me. I love that there's a lot of pop artists around at the moment who are taking influences from metal music and creating this weird pop metal sort of hybrid. And Poppy's I Disagree is one of the perfect examples of that. There's really thrashing, exciting, in-your-face guitar lines, which blend strangely well with this mixture of the sometimes actual like death metal screaming, but a lot of the time it's much more like that Japanese pop sort of oriented stuff that she's known for doing. There's definitely a comparison you can make between this album and the stuff that Baby Metal are doing, but I find this album is less gimmicky than Baby Metal. There's a lot on this album that I think works really, really well, and Poppy uses this style of music really well to get her points and anger and aggression across. She clearly has a lot of things to say and a lot of bad things going on that she wants to sing about, and I think the music complements that angst, aggression and basically depression that she's feeling really, really well. This is easily one of the better metal albums I've heard this year, which I did not expect to say going into it. So I'm going to give this album a 4 out of 5. I really, really love this thing. Algiers are easily one of the most exciting bands in punk at the moment. Their blending of blues, gospel, hardcore and other punk sounds I think blend really, really well together. Their songs are full of vigour, they're incredibly powerful, they're huge and grand in scope, the songwriting is really great and they tackle political issues really well. I loved both of their first two albums, so going into this I was incredibly excited and hoped for another really great album. What I got was definitely another Algiers album, but one that almost felt like them kind of running on empty. I'm not saying this album's necessarily bad, because it really is not bad at all, but it kind of feels like them kind of going through the motions, just doing what they do again, but without any real progression or growth or anything new. So listening to this album, there's nothing really that I haven't heard on the previous two albums. But like I said, that doesn't mean this album's bad. There are some really great songs on here that I love, like the title track and Dispossession, which was one of my favourite singles of last year. There are also more hardcore oriented moments like the bonus track Void, which I really, really like. Overall, if this was their first album, I think I'd love it a lot more, but it's their third album and it follows up The Underside of Power, which was a really fantastic album. So yeah, I'm probably gonna have to give this album 3.5 out of 5. Like, it's not bad, I like it a lot still, but it doesn't really pack the punch or excitement that their previous two albums did. I have never been the biggest AntiFlag fan in the world. I definitely enjoy a lot of their music, especially their earlier stuff, which is much more raw and lo-fi sounding, and I even really enjoyed For Blood and Empire, but I found their music recently has kind of felt very by the numbers and really lacking the angst and excitement that their previous music had. It's not like the messages that they have are less poignant or anything. It just feels like they've said it so many times now that the power has just basically completely worn out. And this album, 2020 Vision, is perfect example of that. There's a lot going on here. There's like some really good messages, but it just feels like the same thing again. And because they've done it so many times now, it's nowhere near as powerful as it once was. Not to mention musically, I think the album is pretty bland. This isn't the worst album I've heard in like the pop punk sort of genre over the last couple of years, but there's not really a lot to it. I finished the album not really hating it or necessarily enjoying it. It was just kind of there. Like, I honestly completely forgot I listened to it straight afterwards, so looking at this list I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing that happened. So yeah, I'm gonna give this thing, like, I'll say 2.5 out of 5. Like, it's not terrible, but it could have been a lot better. I was excited to hear the new Bombay Bicycle Club album because I enjoyed their previous albums quite a bit, and I also liked the lead singles from the album. They're a band that I think are definitely more of a singles band than an album band. There's not really any album that I'd say is necessarily great, but on those albums, every single one has at least 2 or 3 songs that I think are some of the best indie rock songs of the last couple decades. And with this album, I pretty much feel the exact same as I felt about their others. There are a couple of fantastic songs on here, but as an album as a whole, it's just kind of mediocre at best. There's nothing really unique that they're doing here. They're basically just doing everything that basically any indie band are doing at the moment. They don't really grow from what they've done previously. The hiatus seemed kind of pointless because they just kind of came back and did the same thing again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If the formula works, why change it? But I do think sometimes even if the formula works, if you use it too many times, then it can get a bit stale. And although this isn't necessarily stale, it's still a Bombay Bicycle Club album, and it still has the same level of quality of the other Bombay Bicycle Club albums. I think they have a lot of work to do before they're going to create a really great album. Yeah, it's a Bombay Bicycle Club album. If you like the band a lot, you'll probably like this album, but if you agree with me and think they're more of a singles band than an album band, you'll probably not be changed with this album, because it is literally the exact same as everything else they've done before. I'm going to give this thing a 3 out of 5, just because the songs I like, I really love, and are some of my favourite songs of the year. Easy Life are easily one of the most interesting bands around at the moment, blending R&B, hip-hop and indie into this weird hybrid of music that isn't necessarily original, but the way they bring them all together to create this unique formula I think is pretty interesting and exciting. This mixtape Junk Food is a perfect example of what they're really good at. Most of their songs are slow jams, especially on this mixtape where nearly every single song is very mid-tempo, but I think it works well. The lyrics are at times a little bit amateurish, but I feel like that kind of fits the style and aesthetic that they're going for. And there are some really, really catchy, memorable, fantastic songs on there. Dead Celebrities is one of my favourite songs of the year. I really enjoyed this thing. If you're looking for something new, something with this interesting blend of indie and R&B and hip-hop, then yeah, check out this Easy Life mixtape, because it's pretty damn good. I can swallow a bottle of alcohol in a... Why? Why do you keep doing this? I mean, it's better than the last two, I guess, but I don't really understand this. Like, the idea of making this horrorcore hip-hop album inspired by Alfred Hitchcock with like samples from his old album that he made years ago, I thought that was a really cool idea. Eminem used to be the master of horrorcore with like the Slim Shady LP, but this album is so bad. I'm lost for words. This album is terrible. Some of the lyrics on this thing are some of the funniest lyrics I've ever heard in my life. When this album came out, people were turning some of these lyrics into memes, and there's some moments on the album that every time like I see the lyrics like written somewhere from something that someone shared, I still like almost cry with laughter. I'm flabbergasted as to how terrible Eminem has gotten. Like, he still has good flow and everything. His performances are still good, and the instrumentation isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but his lyrical content it's taken more than a nosedive. It like 1.5 out of 5 maybe. I feel like that's being too generous, because this thing is really bad. But yeah, please either work on your lyrics more with other writers who aren't afraid to tell you that your music and lyrics are shit, or just retire. You know, you're far past your prime. Even albums like the Marshall Mathers LP 2, which was still pretty good, is nowhere near as good as the first one, or even the Eminem show from the 2000s. Like, I wouldn't recommend this album to anyone. It's not worth your time. I don't like this band still. I keep trying, but no. The sad thing is, I've seen them live twice, and I'm meant to be seeing them live again next year, and every time I stand there and want to die because I don't like them. I don't get it. They're just the most generic indie band in the world. This music's so boring. It's so boring, and they're doing the same thing again. There's no progression. This is the same album they've released 3 times now. Fuck Blossoms. I just can't be bothered anymore. I don't know why I keep giving them a go, because I know I'm not going to like it, but they have one song I like, but it's not on this album, so moving on. I don't even have a rating for it, because yeah, moving on. Going into this Against All Logic album, I had no clue who he was. I had never heard any of his music, never heard any of the other projects he'd done under different names, including his own name. I was just intrigued because of the fact that Anthony Fantano gave his previous album a really great review and gave this album also a really great review. And I keep meaning to get into more electronic music, so I thought this was an interesting place to dive out and expand into. And yeah, I loved this album. It's this really great blending of house, lo-fi, electronic sort of stuff. I'm not really an expert in electronic music, so there's not really a lot I can say about it, but I really liked it. And if you like house music and this sort of weird lo-fi experimental sort of electronic stuff, then I highly recommend Against All Logic's newest album. In fact, I'd highly recommend the previous album as well. I think they're both on par with each other. Yeah, hopefully by the time the year's ended and I'm doing my year-end list, I'll have more to say, because I'll have listened to a little bit more electronic music than I have, and listened to this album a few more times. But yeah, really digging this thing. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. Top-notch album. Oh boy. That's all I have to say, oh boy. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting review when I actually sit down and break this album apart and talk in depth about it. But for now, no. Just no. There are kids outside screaming, they keep putting me off, but all I have to say about this album is no. This half a star, just... I am a defeated person. If you're looking for some fun, bright, catchy indie pop, indie rock sort of stuff with clearly has a lot of inspiration from some of the more recent emo pop bands from the late 2000s, like Paramore and Panic at the Disco, then Beach Bunnies' Honeymoon is definitely an album that I'd recommend. I really dug this thing. It's very short and brisk, never overstays its welcome, and there is some great songwriting on this album, and yeah, I really dig this. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. I was excited for this new Grimes album because I really loved her last album, Art Angels. I've never really been a huge fan of some of her more experimental, older electronic stuff, but Art Angels really clicked with me and I loved it. But yeah, this one, I don't really like it that much. That's not to say that I overall hate it, because there are some songs I do like a lot, like Delete Forever, which I think is an incredible song and one of the best songs of the year. I think all the singles of the album are really good. except for We Appreciate Power, which is a pretty terrible song. I don't know what it is about this album, it just did not click with me. I'm not a fan. I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 5. Yeah.
Yeah, she's my sweet.
I've been meaning to give King Krule a proper go for a long time now, so this was actually my first King Krule album and I really enjoyed it. I went back, listened to all their albums, but yeah, I still think this is his best to date. It's this great blending of very dark, mid-tempo, punk, rock and jazz sort of stuff that comes together in a really interesting, powerful and really bleak way. I don't think I've listened to this album and been in a good mood afterwards. It's a very depressing one, but it's definitely a very rewarding and really great listen. I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5. So another house album that I don't really have much to say about, but yeah, production wise it's really great. I love the songs with vocals on them, which I didn't realise Caribou could actually sing. Like, going into it I thought it was just going to be like a straight up instrumental house album, but no, he has some pretty good chops on him. I was meant to see them live supporting Tame Impala this year, but the corona completely ruined that, so that's not going to happen now. But yeah, I dug this thing a lot. I am interested to check out some of his other music, but yeah, I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5. It's a really solid house album that I enjoyed a lot. I am genuinely terrified of Code Orange. They are one of the darkest, heaviest bands that I think I've ever listened to. And of course I've listened to people like Cannibal Corpse and like incredibly like over the top levels of heavy, but there's something about Code Orange's music that is so dour and so heavily distorted and dirty and raw that it just hits me really hard. And this new album, Underneath, is probably the darkest album they've done to date. There are points where this is like listening to the scariest film ever made. This is one of the darkest, most grueling albums to get through, but man, is it a fantastic album. I am never normally a metalcore fan, but this album is just so great. It's clear that they're inspired by electronic music and they basically compose their songs to sound electronic and sound like they're composed by computer, but it works really, really well. A lot of bands who do similar things, like try and blend metalcore with more electronic sounds, completely fall flat on their face, but Code Orange use it to their advantage and create something that's incredibly aggressive and pounding and fucking terrifying. There are points on this album that send shivers down my spine every time I listen to it. I cannot tell you how much I love this album. It's easily the best metal album of the year. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. Possibly that will change over repeated listens, but yeah, really, really love this thing. While I always say I am quite a big Weeknd fan, admittedly I don't think he's really done an album that I felt was incredibly consistent where every single song was great. Even Beauty Behind the Madness, which was probably my favourite album before this one, I thought there was a lot of songs that kind of were very miss, even if the songs that hit so damn hard that it made me really like the record and put it on my decade end list. But After Hours is the most consistent, straightforward record he's ever done. There's not a single song on this album that I don't think is good. And when the album is at its best, it's some of the best pop music of the year and easily some of the best music The Weeknd has ever written. The production is great. I love the clear influence from 80s new wave and funk, and like Prince and Michael Jackson were clearly very huge influences on this album. And yeah, there are some incredible songs on this album. Blinding Lights is probably my favourite song of the year so far. I have gone back to this album so many times and I enjoy it every single time. It's probably the best breakup album I've heard all year. Not that I think I've heard many, but yeah, if you like The Weeknd, or even if you don't and just want some like fun R&B with like this underlying sadness to it, then I do recommend giving this album a go. Like, I feel like this is an album that can convert people if they're not big Weeknd fans, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe people who don't like Weeknd still won't be converted with this thing. But yeah, I'm gonna give After Hours a 4 out of 5. This new Childish Gambino album is sadly an example of ego getting to someone and making them just completely fuck up everything. A big part of Gambino's image has always been to be this overly egotistical person, especially in his rap days. But with this album, I feel like it gets too far where his ego doesn't come off comedic or anything. It just kind of completely destroys the music and turns it into something that can at times be almost completely unlistenable. It's very raw and distorted at times. There's lots of very abrasive, annoying noises. And although in some instances I think it works well, a lot of the time this is like listening to if the Death Grips just gave up and just farted into a microphone, did all their normal, like all the normal production stuff they did, and just released it unfinished. It's just not a very good album at all. There's some alright songs on it, but yeah, I didn't expect he'd make another bad album, but he did. Hopefully this isn't the last Gambino album as he said it was going to be, because what a terrible way to go out, especially follow up a great album like the last one. But yeah, I'm thinking a 2 with this album. Yeah, I can't give it anything higher. This is just not a good album. I've definitely never been a huge fan of Sufjan Stevens when he's just doing instrumental electronic music. Not that I don't like his electronic stuff. Age of Odds is an incredible album, but just his straight up instrumental electronic music I've never been a huge fan of. And him creating ambient new age music, although I don't think is as bad as it could have been, is still not the best thing in the world. The music is very bland and basic. It kind of sounds like an album to introduce you to this genre if you're not very familiar with it. I'm not a huge expert on new age or ambient electronic music, but listening to this album I kept thinking of the few albums in both genres that I've heard that did everything a lot better. Like, this album isn't necessarily, it's not bad at all, but it's not the best. Like, everything in this album I've heard done better before. It's a nice little relaxing album that you can put on in the background, or if you're meditating, or if you're really stressed out and just want to unwind to something. But it's not really the sort of album that I'd go out of my way to put on and pay full attention to, because there's really not a lot here. It's very bare and empty, and although that was basically the plan with it, I don't think it works too well in execution. Like I said, it's not bad, but yeah, not really a fan. The Chats are easily one of the best bands in punk at the moment, blending the pub rock sound of a lot of 70s and 80s British punk bands with almost like Black Flag sort of hardcore sounds. It's kind of like listening to a Black Flag song at like half the tempo with less distortion on it, and an incredibly Australian twang. This is a very hard-hitting, fast and hilarious album. I really like it. It's an album that I think I need to listen to a few more times to fully judge, but if you're looking for just some straightforward Australian punk music, then I highly recommend this one. I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5. I liked the songs that I heard from Dua Lipa's first album, but I never actually listened to the thing in full. I only listened to Future Nostalgia because of the amount of hype surrounding it. Like, a lot of people who didn't like the first album was like head over heels in love with this album, so I was like, hell yeah, I'll check it out. And yeah, I completely understand the hype. This is some really great, funky 80s inspired synth pop that I think is really great and catchy and fun. Yeah, the Future Nostalgia name very much sums up what this album kind of is trying to be. It's very much focused on blending nostalgic 80s sort of sounds with modern day pop techniques, as did like albums like Melodrama or 1989, and I think it works really, really well because Dua Lipa is an incredibly confident person with a great voice. Production wise, this album is almost flawless. There's some absolute bangers on this album. It's one of the best pop albums I've heard this year, and I really, really dig it. For now, I'll give it 3.5 out of 5, simply because I've only listened to it once and I don't think that's enough to fully judge it, but I definitely see it being one that over time my thoughts will definitely improve on it. At least I hope so. During lockdown, one of the first things I did was listen to the entire discography of Pearl Jam, because they've been a band I've been meaning to get into for a long time, and I wanted to expand the grunge bands that I've been listening to. Not only that, because they had a new album out, I kind of wanted to prepare and hear what they had to offer so I could like do a proper review. Of course, I didn't listen to it in time. I listened to it like a month or two after it came out. But if you like Pearl Jam, then I highly recommend this album. I enjoyed it a lot. I think it sounds like Pearl Jam. You can definitely make the argument that Pearl Jam are kind of getting a bit tired and basically just doing the same thing again. This is the sort of just straight up alt rock stuff that they've been doing since the early 2000s. So if you like that era of Pearl Jam, then you'll probably enjoy this. There's also a little bit of new wave influences throughout the album, including Dance of the Clairvoyants, which is a straight up Talking Heads clone, which I know a lot of people hate, but I really loved that song. But yeah, I enjoy this thing. It's not gonna change the world or anything, and it's far from the best Pearl Jam album, but if you enjoy Pearl Jam then, and you haven't listened to it, especially if you enjoy their 2000s to early 2010 stuff, then I recommend this record, because it's basically just more of that. Yeah, so I'll give it 3 out of 5. Sorry are one of the weirdest bands in the indie scene at the moment. Their music blends lo-fi, experimental and hip-hop together to create this very unique sound that I kind of find it hard to describe, but their debut album kind of sums up everything that I think they're about. It kind of has all the sounds of their previous singles and stuff that they've done before just crammed into one. There's a lot of really great songs on here. Unique, that's the only thing I can say. If you're looking for something unlike anything else in the scene at the moment, then I recommend this, because it's very interesting. I think this is an album that I need to listen to more, like a lot of these albums, but I've just never got around to checking it out again. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, so I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. Again, this is kind of like a placeholder score that maybe it will change over repeated listens. If you're a fan of All Time Low, you will probably be a fan of Wake Up Sunshine. If you're not a fan of All Time Low, you will probably not be a fan of Wake Up Sunshine. I have massively gone off pop punk in the last few years, so this was never going to be the album for me. The reason I think I enjoyed their last album so much was because it stepped away from pop punk and was doing more interesting synth pop sort of stuff. This album is kind of a response to the hatred everyone gave that last album, so it is them returning to basics, and yeah, I'm not a fan. It sounds youthful in a way that people in their 30s should not be writing. It sounds like them trying to write like they're 17 still, and it just doesn't really work. I don't find any of the riffs or choruses or anything really that different or unique for them. It's just kind of the same thing they've done before. But like I said, if you enjoy All Time Low, you will probably enjoy this album. It's not groundbreaking, but it's not the worst thing ever made. It's better than Future Hearts. That's about all I can really say. I'm not a fan, but I've heard a lot worse, so I'm gonna give it a 2.5 out of 5. Man, what is there to say about Fetch the Bolt Cutters that's not been said by everyone on the planet now? This is a masterpiece. This is the best album of the year by far, by miles. This is the best album of the year. It's this really unique, bare, and at times really hard-hitting and depressing record where the only real instruments are like percussion and piano. There's not really much to it, and I think the very sparse instrumentation helps the vocals and lyrics really ring harder, and there's a lot of really powerful messages, clearly inspired by the Me Too movement, and Fiona Apple basically sings about her experiences with abuse and being used by people in the music industry. It's a hard album to get through because it is incredibly dark and depressing, but it is worth it 100%. This is fantastic. I give it 5 out of 5 easily. It's the only 5 I've given so far this year. Let's see if anything else this year can change that. I am not a huge Boston Manor fan. I think they've got a couple of songs I like. They're not bad. They're just not really for me. So this album is them doing the same again. It's a Boston Manor album. I didn't hate it. I just wasn't really a fan because, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of them. I don't know my rating. I don't have a rating for this one. I just don't like him. Set My Heart on Fire Immediately is a very appropriate name for this album because Jesus Christ is this depressing. I like Perfume Genius, and this is one of his best albums to date, but yeah, it is really depressing and hard to get through at points. But I think this is also an album I need to listen to more. I only really listened to it once, like a couple of days ago, so it's an album that I think needs to sit with me more and that I need to re-listen to. So for now I'm going to give it, I'll say a 4 out of 5 because I did enjoy it a lot, but yeah, it needs more listening for me. While I'm a fan of Jeff Rosenstock, his last couple of albums have been, I wouldn't say bad because they're really good still, but compared to Worry and We Cool, it's such a step down, and No Dream isn't really a step in the right direction, it's just kind of a step into a completely different direction. Clearly inspired by a lot of the California punk scene from the 90s, this album is fast, heavy, hard-hitting punk rock, as you'd expect from Jeff Rosenstock. I just don't think it has any of the wit or charm that his best music has. This feels much more like a Bomb the Music Industry record than a Jeff Rosenstock record. It's aggressive and exciting, but I didn't find myself as captured by it as I did with We Cool or Worry. I think it's a step up from Post, which retrospectively I'm not a huge fan of, but yeah, this could have been a lot better. Maybe with a few more listens. I've listened to it a few times already, but maybe with a few more listens it will eventually grow. But yeah, compared to his best albums, this doesn't really hold a candle to it. So yeah, so I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5 because I do like it a lot, but it could have been a lot better. This is another terrifying album. I didn't expect to like an album that blends hardcore hip hop and classic heavy metal so much, but this album was just one of the biggest punches to the face I've ever heard. This is aggressive, hard-hitting, almost satanic sounding at times. This is really, really great. Backwash is a rapper that I'm gonna heavily follow from now on because I love the work she did on this record. It's just fantastic, very hard-hitting, aggressive. I love like the samples from people like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin sprinkled with her throughout. There's a lot to this album that I really, really love. I cannot recommend it enough, so I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. Oh, I'm still recording. I'm sorry, I was listening to the new 1975 album and it bored me to sleep. I don't like the 1975 at the best of times, so when they've just completely given up, been completely consumed by their egos and created the most egotistical, overly bloated mess that you could possibly make, I especially do not like it. There are songs I do like. People is like on a completely whole other level. That song is so fantastic. It is better than all their other songs combined. It's an incredible punk song, but everything else is just so bland. It's just the same thing they always do, just this really milquetoast, boring indie pop synth heavy garbage. It's just, I don't like it. I do like some of the moments clearly inspired by house music. There's like a few like straight up house songs on there with no singing or anything that I think are actually pretty decent, but everything else is terrible. 1.5, like, that's being generous. This album's terrible. Vistas are not a very original band, but I enjoy what they're doing a lot. I think it's a really fun, bouncy, summery, indie pop sort of thing that is catchy and exciting. And yeah, I really enjoy this record, but I'm biased because I was already a fan of them. But yeah, it's like I said, it's not groundbreaking, it's not super original, but there's some really well written, catchy songs on there that I like a lot. I'm going to give this album a 3.5 out of 5. Jack Garrett's debut phase was my favourite album of 2016, so I was incredibly excited for his follow-up, even if it did take a long time to eventually come out. I hated the way it was released. It was released similar to that Hayley Williams album where it's split into 4 EPs spread across a few months. I think that release method is really awful and I hate it, but listening to the album, I really enjoyed it. The way it was released is if you buy the vinyl version, it comes with a different track list than the normal like streaming service, which is like split into 4 EPs, and the track list of the vinyl release is a billion times better because it just flows better, it tells a more cohesive story, it works so much better. But I don't like the way it's split into 4 EPs because it just sounds so like disjointed. But if I was to ignore the streaming track list and review like the physical copy version, I really like this thing. It's an incredibly honest, open piece of R&B, synth pop sort of stuff. The production is so much better than the previous album because he worked with another producer who helped hone in a lot of these ideas and make him sound a lot more fully formed. There are some moments that definitely feel like he's copying songs from the previous record, but for the most part I think this is a really well written, deep, at times very depressing and honest pop album that I really enjoy. I'm going to give this thing 4 out of 5. Apart from their song Stars, I had no clue who Hum were. I listened to this album because it was recommended to me by a friend and I saw the huge like critical praise it got, and it's alright. I love the blending of shoegaze and alternative metal to create this very doomy, heavy, sludgy sort of sound that's incredibly atmospheric, hard-hitting, but actually quite melodic and catchy at points. The problem that I had with the album is that a lot of the songs are way too long. A large majority of the songs on this album are at least 8 minutes long, and I don't think those songs really work that well. Literally just because they're so repetitive. The songs that are long are literally just long because they take small sections where they play riffs and stuff and just extend it out massively to the point where it just gets really boring. And that is literally just my biggest problem with the album, is that it's way too long. If every song that was over 4 or 5 minutes was like shortened, I probably would have loved this album, but as it stands, it feels too repetitive for its own good, and it just gets so boring when the songs never end. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5 because, like I said, I do enjoy a lot of the album. It's just that a lot of the songs are too long. And if you were to cut those songs down, I would like it a lot more. But as it stands, yeah, that's all I'm going to give it now. DMAs aren't bad. I've never really massively jumped towards them, but I enjoyed a couple songs I've heard by them, and if they were to come on at like an indie club or something, which they have happened when I've been to them before, I wouldn't hate it. This album is just that sums up the album. It's not bad, it's not good, it's like a straight up Oasis ripoff. Like, yeah, this is just pure Oasis, just sung by other people. Like, if you like Oasis and are sad that they've broken up and want to hear more Oasis, this is that. It's that catchy brand of Britpop with slightly overdriven atmospheric reverb heavy guitars and loads of acoustic guitars and whiny vocals. This is that. It's just Oasis. I don't remember their other stuff being this. I remember it being clearly inspired by Britpop and Oasis and stuff, but I don't remember it straight up completely ripping him off as if they're the Greta Van Fleet of Oasis. Like, yeah, I'm not into it. I'm gonna give it a 2 because if I wanted to listen to Oasis, I'd listen to Oasis. I'm not gonna listen to B grade them. Although if I wanted to listen to B grade Oasis, I'd probably listen to some shit like BDI or Liam Gallagher's solo stuff. Oliver Tree is a genius. When it comes to marketing, there is literally no one in the music industry who is doing it as well as him. He is a marketing genius, and his music is pretty damn good as well. I really enjoy it. It's very clearly inspired by 90s alternative bands, but there's definitely a more modern synth pop sort of style to it and a lot of hip hop influence as well. This is like if you take bands like Nirvana's like Nevermind, mix it with Beck, and then mix it with someone like 21 Pilots. I know he would hate that because they have a huge feud, but if you mixed all of them together, you'd get Oliver Tree. His music is very sarcastic and at times kind of on the nose, but I think it works really, really well. I love the production, I love the songwriting. It's a shame that a lot of the songs are literally just the big singles that he's released, but I know he's had to sit on this album for years because the studio fucked him over. But yeah, I really, really like this album and I would recommend it to pretty much everyone. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Again, maybe I'll change my mind over time, but I have listened to it a lot. I've basically listened to it non-stop since it came out, so really love this thing. How? I don't understand this album. I have never been a massive neck deep fan, but I enjoyed The Peace and the Panic, their last album, quite a bit. As pop punk goes, I thought that was pretty damn good. But this new album is like if you tried to make a pop punk album, fell asleep halfway through it, just recorded the snores that you made. Or even you took a pop punk album and slowed it down so much, took off all the distortion, but kept that very whiny, snotty vocals and angst-filled lyrics about how mum and dad don't understand and wanting pizza and shit, and put it into an album. That's this. It's so bland. There's not really an exciting angst-filled moment at all, and that wouldn't necessarily be a problem if the actual lyrical content was anything good, and it's not. And all the performances are pretty bad, especially the vocals, which are so heavily auto-tuned. It sounds like I'm listening to T-Pain or 30H3. Like, this is like listening to like early 2010s crunk music. That's how overly auto-tuned it is, especially on the first song where he literally just sounds so robotic. It's terrible. Like, I don't have a problem with pitch correction because it's something that basically everyone uses at some point if you're making music. I mean, it's something that even I use occasionally if I want to fix like a vocal part that I think sounds good but I miss a note or something. That's pretty normal. A lot of people do that. But when you use it so heavily to the point where you're just completely reliant on it, it completely makes you question whether you even have talent to begin with. I had the same problem with Blink-182's last album, even like California. No, I have that problem with pretty much all Blink-182 music, to be fair. But this album takes it so far, it just sounds so artificial and fake. This album in general sounds artificial. It's so bad. I don't get how they fucked this album up so bad. It's like they didn't try. And lyrically, this album ranges from being like average to some of the funniest lyrics I've ever heard in my life. My colour's yellow and green, but I like some purple with my tangerine, is a quote from Low Life, which is one of the worst songs on the album. There's multiple parts in that song where they reference the purple tangerine, and like, I get that they're going for some sort of metaphor, and I understand like it's a metaphorical thing that actually means something, but it's such a terrible lyric. Like, how could anyone think that's a good lyric? I don't understand it. Fuck this album. 1 out of 5. This album is terrible. Jesus fucking Christ. How did they... I'm flabbergasted how this album is so bad. I was going to write a full review of it, but I'd have to listen to the album again, and I'd literally rather castrate myself with a spoon. Like, fuck that. And that brings us to the end of the video. I'm really tired because that took a lot longer than I thought, and I had to like get angry about songs, and I'm not an angry person, so when I force myself to get angry for these videos, I basically completely drain myself. So yeah, I don't know how this video went on so long. Hopefully it's not as bad when I edit it down, but I guess we'll see. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Hopefully for the rest of the year I'll actually stay on top of albums and actually like review them when they come out. I was going to do another one of these videos of the other albums that I haven't listened to yet, so stay tuned for that when it eventually comes out. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.